mentoring community, all things mentoring lounge. So, welcome for today. Our topic is to do a STEEP review of mentoring, STEEP being an acronym. We'll go over that in a few minutes. Just to let you know, I'm Stephen Hobbs. I am one of the co founders of the International Mentoring Community. Joining me is Doug Lawrence, and we'll share a little bit more about who we are. But let's just return to that word STEEP. STEEP is actually social, cultural, technological, environmental, economic, and political. It's a way for Doug and I just to sort of summarize a way of looking at some insights and ideas for 2023. The last interview that we did together, shared a conversation. We sort of did a summary of what happened in 2022 with all the videos that we produced, and sort of gave a little bit of a projection forecast for 2023. But we thought we would just do a little bit more in-depth dive into that, considering we are now in 2023. So what I'm going to do is just have Doug just share a little bit more about what you do with IMC. I'll do the same. Then we'll have you share with us the definition that we use in IMC for mentoring, and then we'll get into the STEEP review of mentoring. So Doug, you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Doug Lawrence, and I'm one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community. And in that capacity, I am the Director of Practice and Outreach. And I also have my own company, Talent C, which is focused on all things mentoring.
Great. And I have my own company, Wealth Movement, WELLTH Movement. It's all about all things well-being and well-living to the nth degree. I do mentoring as well, but my main role with IMC is education and certification. So Doug brings you in, I get you to move through, and then you meet us at the other end when we do the certification process. And so you'll get to know us as we go, and that is wonderful. So again, Doug, I think it would be helpful for us to share a little bit about what our definition of mentoring is from an IMC perspective.
Certainly. So mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where the mentor and mentee learn and grow together through personal and professional development.
Is there anything in particular you want to emphasize today?
You know, when I think about it, the two-way trusted relationship it is something that's really important, because without that trust, it's very difficult to create that deeper, richer mentoring experience.
Yeah, I think we're going to probably come back and take a look at that word trust again. It seems to be one of those words that's popping up in a lot of aspects of our lives. And sometimes we get maybe a little confused. What does that mean? We sometimes will talk about truth, trust, and transparency. We have done a video on that in the past, but I think it might be worth digging in a little bit deeper into this word trust. What do you say, Doug?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that would be great. But today is what we're going to do is take a look at the STEEP review of mentoring. Again, STEEP is social, cultural, technological, environmental, economic, and political. Doug and I have had a little bit of a chat about what some of the topics we wanted to bring forward under each of those letters, and that's how we're going to share it. But I thought I would just give you a little background about where did the word STEEP come from, why are we using STEEP? And I'm doing it because years ago I learned something called PEST, political, economic, social, cultural, and technological. But a lot of people would use the word, the T was like, it was a threat. The pest was a threat, and these things are threats. And I thought, I'm not quite sure that we should be looking at pests through this threat lens. So what it did was it got me to think, what's another way in which to share it? And I brought forward to Doug, I said, what about STEEP? And I said, because STEEP is, well, often when you're in learning about something like mentoring, there's a bit of a steep hill, an incline, you got to go up to get there. And once you get to the top, you find yourself, oh, guess what? There's something I also have to cross. Hey, there's something else I need to learn. So down I go and up I go and down I go and up I go. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we looked at it from a steep perspective? And then I went, hang on a minute. If you're making a good cup of tea, don't you steep it, which gives you a chance to rest a little bit? And sometimes we forget when we're learning as we're speeding through things, chugging along, and you're learning about mentoring and making sure everything's going without taking a rest, a little bit of reflection. So I said, it's both a mountain hill, the effort you got to go through, but it's also this nurture a cup of tea and take a little bit of a rest. And I said, Doug, does that make sense? Can we use that? And we thought, yeah, sure, let's give it a go. And so that's where we are today with steep review of mentoring. And the first one that we wanted to go through was the social cultural aspect. There's a couple of things that I want to share, and then I'm just going to prompt Doug to share a couple of his as well. So the first one, and it's still present from when we were talking back in 2022, but I think it's actually creeping up with a little bit more intensity. It's around this notion of jumping the experience queue. And what I'm referring to there is, hey, you can go to Google search. You don't have to go take courses a lot of times now. And there's a new technology that's coming on. I'll share a little bit more when we get to the T aspect. But the notion is if I go to Google, put in a how-to question, out pops the insights, the information that makes it work. And, oh, great, now I can use that technique, a tool, whatever it is, and off I go and I start mentoring. And I keep saying, hang on a minute, you don't necessarily get the nuance, the background ideas and insights that usually comes from a conversation with someone. So the notion is that this social cultural aspect of I'll just go to Google, get what I need, to YouTube, get what I need, and then work with it. I think it might require you to go put the brakes on that one and slow down and say, hey, well, hang on a minute, let me talk to someone, or let me take a course or something like that to learn a little bit more about what it means to mentor. And there's a complementary piece to that is that with this notion of the aging of those who are in the workplace, and people are not leaving the workplace as they get into their 60s and sometimes even 70s, and we have the new generations coming in, there can sometimes be a little bit of a banging of heads, and maybe some of the young people don't necessarily want to learn from those who are this older, elder storyline, and they'll think, oh, no, I'll just go jump to Google, get what I need. I don't need to talk to someone who's already in the workplace. They've got old ideas and things like that. And I go, again, sort of this notion of mentoring, learning some of the nuances, the behind the scenes. I think it's worth getting to know who is there in your workplace and what do they have to offer from a social cultural point of view. And that's why Doug does a lot of work in supporting mentoring for the workplace programs. It's how do you get up this mentoring program up and into your organization. And personally, I see that we're going to need to do a lot more of that. What do you think, Doug, around this notion of Google and aging and mentoring in the for the workplace?
Well, it's all tied to a term that we use, and actually, it's a service that I know I offer, which is knowledge transfer. Is helping organizations, number one, define the knowledge that needs to transfer from current employees to the new generation that's taking over, and even from a leadership perspective. But it's identifying what that knowledge is, where is it located, and how are we going to get it from point A to point B. So from the incumbent to the new baby manager, for sake of argument, for that new baby manager that's going to be your future leader in your organization. So there's, certainly a lot of that, and with the aging workforce being what it is, and more and more people are now considering retirement. from a mentoring perspective, you can take those people and plug them in as mentors to help with that knowledge transfer piece, and you've got a win-win situation.
But it's also for those who are staying in the workplace to actually get mentored even by those who are coming into the workplace, because there are new insights, new ways in which to socially, culturally interact with one another as well. True?
True. Yeah,
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah. So another thing that I'd like to just bring to the foreground is, and we stress it often, is when you coach, you coach. When you mentor, you mentor. Coaching and mentoring are not the same thing. And I believe that there is going to be a very strong need to make sure that we separate those two, show that they are connected, they do compete, but they also collaborate. And how do we do that? But to really get to a point where, oh, I'm a coach, then you coach. If in your coaching you use some mentoring techniques and tools and that, then mention that these are mentoring tools and techniques. And if you don't know that, then this is a time to get some information, insights from someone like the international mentoring community to be able to help you to distinguish that, so that it's not confusing to the person that you're interacting with. Fair, Doug?
Yeah, that's fair. And what I've found with the mentoring practice that I have is that more and more often today, the topic of mental health, mental well-being is becoming more and more prevalent. And I know when I'm working with people, young entrepreneurs, new managers and stuff like that, that they don't really entertain or think about the idea until you start to share some lived experience about your own personal mental well-being, and they start to see themselves in that story that you're telling, that they all of a sudden go, well, how am I going to deal with that to get myself on a healing journey so that I can be that great contributor to the organization.
So very much mentoring is a support technique that can be used in the mental health area, in the this holistic psychological safety aspect in the workplace. I think that's what you're getting to as well, right?
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes gets lost, but it also means is that from a mentor point of view, all right, to be able to share the stories that Doug is talking about, to be able to improve focus and strengthen your practice as a mentor, to mentor as you mentor is different than attempting to coach someone through mental health. There are times when that might be helpful. I'm not saying no to that, but it's understanding from a mentor point of view, that is a great way to support those who may have a mental health challenge, and then knowing that line with counseling, right? And Doug speaks about that all the time. But I think that what we're attempting to get here with what Doug is sharing and I'm sharing is that there's a credibility, authority, and relevance that's associated with you when you mentor, right? And to truly understand that, because if you confuse it, it can get into some deep doo-doo. True, Doug,
True.
From a mental health perspective?
Yeah, very much. Very much.
And to be able to know which story goes with which, right, is important too. True?
True. And the thing that's causing me the most concern with right this very day is, in light of other conversations that I've had the past few days, is the aspect that a lot of people that are getting involved in the mentoring space are not taking into consideration the impact that a person's mental health actually can have on the relationship that you may very well be trying to create or build with someone else. And every time you meet with somebody and you're not taking that into consideration, you're not really giving or doing them any just anything just by any stretch of the imagination. Is they're going to leave the session with you and there'll be still things pondering in their mind about, well, we didn't talk about this and I wonder why, or we didn't talk about that and I wonder why. So, it's if you're a mentor today and you want to do a deeper, richer mentoring experience, is you need to start to think about how am I going to navigate that mental health, mental well-being space as a mentor, and how am I going to make sure that I'm bringing value, the deeper, richer mentoring experience to the person that I'm working with.
And from an IMC point of view, our mentor practice is to provide those insights, those ideas, because we're looking at mentoring to mentor. We're not looking at whatever is your lived experience, whatever that issue is, but it's the use of mentoring in its true and beautiful aesthetic way, that it's a contribution, an educative contribution for the world with the planet from the whole. And I think, Doug, that's what you're really attempting to get to here is if you truly understand that deeper, richer appreciation of what mentoring is of so much value to workplaces, to families, to communities, whatever social cultural mix you're using here, whatever that might be. Yeah. Is there anything else from a social cultural point of view, from a whole, that you want to add at this point?
No, that's good.
So why don't we pop into the technology storyline?
Okay.
Now, this one is getting to be kind of interesting. And Doug and I have had a couple of conversations about this, is because we're starting to notice like a trend, like how might you use virtual reality to do a simulation for mentoring, a mentor or mentee, and practicing and learning, and you're wearing the goggles going in, right? I should say probably better, headset, going in and seeing it happening at the moment, because we're not at a point where we're using like the holodeck where you're using a hologram, even though some of that technology is starting to come on as well. But there is this move to use virtual reality in support of learning about mentoring. And there's another aspect of this that's coming on. It's the whole artificial intelligence. There is a lot of ideas like, assisting you in writing, or asking a question of certain AI writing technology, and getting, like, you might say, well, what are the 10 steps to set up mentoring? Well, it will pop back 10 steps, but it doesn't mean that they are the best step. It's what it is pulling out of its world as it understands. So we're not to the point where it's necessarily the correct steps. It is steps. So there's this virtual reality, this artificial intelligence with technology. I'm thinking it'll eventually get to a point where it'll be of great assistance, but I wouldn't rely on it at the moment to build your practice, all right, your mentor practice solely on virtual simulations, virtual reality, and artificial writing. Thoughts, Doug?
Well, it's kind of interesting for me because it's sort of deja vu. Was back in 2009, 2010, when I first started Talent C. One of the things that we looked at was creating a program using, back then we didn't really know a whole lot about it, but was something that could create that virtual space where, if I was, say, for example, I was looking at wanting to go into a mentoring session with Bob, and here's some of the background and stuff, and I could actually role play that in a virtual reality type of a situation to better prepare myself, so that I was bringing even that much more value and creating that much more of a deeper, richer mentoring experience, just because of being able to do that. That was back then. And here we are today having a similar conversation. The only thing is technology has advanced.
Yeah, and I think we still got to take a little bit of a pause before you go and implement it right away, right? I think we're still not quite there. I would think in the next year or two, I think we'll probably be closer, and we'll probably find that you and I are going to be talking about, hey, there's this whole new approach to the mentoring using technology. But at the moment, I think we still need to put a little bit of a caveat of don't just go jumping into it full tilt at this point in time. So there's also mentoring software. You hinted at, back 2009, 2010, you were also looking at all different kinds of software, right? And there's a lot of more software out there now than what you probably saw back then. We're 13 years along, and I am going to put, I found a link to some, I think it's marketwatch.com press release about mentoring software. It's not all of the softwares, but again, it is a place to start if you're actually looking for software. But what is the importance of a software to one's mentor practice? Doug, you want to share that?
Well, I know that part of the research that I had done was that it was looking at it from the aspect of the matching issue, and they had recommended that if you had 90 or more matches, that you should look at a software program that would do that for you. So that was the main thing. But what I've seen now is that it has obviously the utilization of a software program has expanded significantly to actually creating communities and being able to do that using the software and a safe place to have a dialogue and a number of different things like that. But the main thing back then when I was looking was, and in fact, that was a recommendation I always took forward when I was working with, excuse me, organizations, was how many pairs do you have, mentor mentee, and if it hits that magic number, we should have a conversation about the matching process and the use of a software program.
For sure. And some of the software actually has some really great articles that you can get. It isn't necessarily a deep dive into the mentor practice. There are support ideas like what makes a good mentor, what makes a good mentee, how might you start up a mentoring arrangement, these kind of ideas. But they still don't have at all. Now, I haven't gone into every software, so that sharing that I just made is still open, and you might find that the software that you go and look at, there might be even more there. But I just bring that to your attention. But there's an interesting thing that's starting to happen now is the use of apps and how apps can be linked to a log book, a mentoring log book, right? So right on your phone, you could type in what you just did from a mentoring point of view, so that what you're doing is you're starting to gather your mentor log evidence of mentoring. So some of that technology is coming along to be able to support it as well. It's sort of like another way is thinking about it as taking notes on your phone and then downloading those later. But there are apps that are starting to come on that one could use. We haven't done a deep dive at this point in time into the apps, but we know that they are starting to come on board. Anything you want to add around that one?
No, I think using the logbook idea is a great path to follow, and largely the more that we can automate processes like that, the more people will start to make use of those, and that's what we really want. It's very important. Having the logbook, it's very important having that in place, especially if you're entertaining the certification path.
Yeah, and that's true. It's because from a certification point of view, you want to provide evidence, right, that you have done what you're supposed to have done, and that's very helpful. So, okay, well, why don't we take a look at the first E of the two E's? That one is in environmental. And what I wanted to bring forward on that one to start with is this notion of the hybrid workplace. The use of Zoom, this communication technology that we have here. Some people will be in the office, some people will be at home. Some people may not ever come in from home into the office. Some people may be full in the office, and there's this hybrid, and how do we go about doing it? And the notion of virtual mentoring. Does it work? Doesn't it work? Right? I think, let me ask you, Doug, do you think virtual mentoring, the use of tools and techniques like a Zoom, a Google Meet, any of those technologies from an environmental to be able to get into the environment of mentoring, help or hinder? What's your thoughts?
I think it helps because from a reach perspective, I'm able to reach a lot more people than if I was expected to meet face to face. So it does simplify the creating the ability to be able to reach a lot more people, a broader audience than it would any other way.
Yeah. Well, there's another way of looking at environment as well, and I sort of slip over into some of the things that I know about. It's the actual use of nature, the environment as a place in which to do mentoring. Sometimes they'll talk about what's called outdoor mentoring. They might use a title like, what was it? Adventure therapy, adventure counseling, and some people are talking about adventure mentoring. But again, always making sure that when you mentor, you mentor, when you counsel, right, is to be very clear about that. But to go for a walk in nature with the trees and that, there is something there metaphorically that one can use to advance the notion of mentoring. And it's something that I support, right? That's one of the areas that I support. Doug does a lot of the mentoring for the workplace. I'm attempting to do it with techniques like the use of nature, and that's where mentoring can take place. So I just wanted to drop that in because a lot of times we forget the environment when we're talking about mentoring actually can be outside, right? Because so often we go, oh, it's hybrid, it's across these communication tools and techniques, or it's done in the office and things like that. But in actual fact, there's lots of other places for it to happen as well. Anything else about environment that you want to bring up at this point in time?
No, that's good.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the economic component. From an economics, there is one that is really edging its way in here is, can you afford to get a mentor? Now, you go, oh, do you mean money? Yeah, there's the money aspect. I think we would both agree, and all of us who are listening in, can you afford not to get a mentor? I think it's let me find a mentor, even if I'm asking someone to do it for free. But there is the notion of getting paid to mentor. It was just this morning, Doug and I were talking about it, about, a lot of times with coaching, because it was a recent bringing forward of an educative approach, it started off with money being associated with it. Mentoring has been around for a long time, right? And a lot of people still see it as it's something that you do for free. It's sort of a gift to get to the gift kind of idea. And so there is this story is, can I afford to get mentoring? And in the economics of it. And I say, if you are going to pay for it, and there's going to be times when you will be paying for it, right, as you tap into someone else's lived experience, you will need to set a little bit aside, right, to be able to support that person. You can still ask, hey, will you do it for free? But there are times when you need to get paid. Any thoughts there, Doug?
Well, it's an interesting topic, and I did quite a bit of reading and research on it. And what I found is that there, yes, it's always been in the past. It's always been that mentoring is offered at no cost. And now what I'm seeing is more and more people are starting to pay for mentoring services and are paying a pretty penny for those type of services. And that they, as we've been discussing, they are different from that of a coach. So it's, when you mentor, you mentor. When you coach, you coach. So they are different. And there is that executive level mentoring that takes place, that people pay quite a lot of money for that type of service. And it's the other part that is important for me is that if you're selecting a mentor that you're going to be paying for, it would be highly, highly recommended that that individual be somebody that has gone through a certification process for mentors so that they understand the process concepts and the whole deeper, richer mentoring experience.
Yeah. Well, I think that also brings up, is there a business opportunity for someone to be a mentor to put their shingle out? And, again, as just because you can doesn't mean you should. But is there a business out there? Do you want to share a little bit about where you're coming from a business point of view? I think that would be helpful. And I just have to pop away for a second. Something's just taking place over here. And I think it would be good if you could just share a little bit about how you do things, Doug.
Yeah, I certainly can do that. So I started a business in 2009, and what it was, I was job coaching university students, and the relationship morphed itself from a job coaching one into one where something would happen in the workforce once they got hired and they weren't sure how to deal with it. So they would get a hold of somebody, said, get a hold of Doug, he'll help you, and all that sort of stuff. And so I started to build a practice based on referrals to be able to help individuals do that and move forward with that. So I actually have a practice, mentoring practice, where I have a combination of some of the services I'm offering to individuals who are not in a position to be able to pay. I offer them, and I'll explain in a minute why. And then I have individuals and organizations that are paying for my lived experience. So when I go into their organization, I share a lot of those lived experiences. So those are kind of the sort of the two paths. But the one thing that I've always said, and I tell prospective clients, is that if in our conversation in the work up to whether I engage or not, if at any time money becomes the reason why we don't or why we won't move forward, we'll take it off the table, because I won't leave anyone on the island by themselves.
And I certainly share that. And thank you for letting me just drop out. I didn't think people need to hear dogs barking. Yeah, so I get that. And I think that's really true. That's why you can't be so lean one direction. It's only free. It's only paid. There's got to be times where you're going to float around in there a little bit. And that's where it becomes really important to understand that. So thank you for sharing that. Anything else about the economic aspects of things before we pop over into the last of STEEP?
No, I think that's got it.
Okay. Well, then let's take a look at political. And I might touch a little bit of nerves here, and it's not our intention. What we're attempting to bring forward is that there is politics involved. Mentoring is something that is happening in workplaces. It's happening in schools. It's happening in the community. It's happening in a lot of places where there are politics, right? And how to bring on even mentoring of politicians to be able to get ready to take on their role as politicians, right? But there's something here that is actually starting to take place. And Doug and I have noticed the conversation around looking at mentoring possibly as becoming a paraprofessional status, getting to that level. There's the professional status where what you do is you take care of the body of knowledge, the domain of knowledge, and but you also, as a group, certify the person. So a board certified doctor, the bar certified lawyer. These are professionals. There is some conversation that's happening around moving mentoring underneath a paraprofessional linked to the world of education, educative assistants, and that have gotten a bit more of a paraprofessional status associated with it. So we're seeing some conversations starting to pop up, especially in the youth area, is that it might be a value if you're going to be mentoring is to actually take a look at it through a paraprofessional lens. Anything you want to add to that, Doug?
I think, I'm quite ecstatic about this move, the movement to move towards take mentoring and move it towards a paraprofessional, because that's just going to bring credibility. It's going to validate that the 3 or 4 thousand year journey that we've been on to get mentoring from being that is you're not getting paid for it to where you could be getting paid for it to you will be getting paid. And I think, there's that journey, and it's going to be helped along by the aspect of whether we're paraprofessional or not.
Yeah, and I think that it's something that it's going to be a topic that we're going to look at. It's something we're going to have to look at here soon. I think the same conversation is going into coaching. I think a lot of people have already recognized coaching because it's paid. They already give it a sort of a paraprofessional language to it because they'll put in job. If you're going to coach, do you have certification?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's where, from an IMC point of view, we're attempting to offer that support, all right, backed up by things like the International Standards Organization, looking at mentoring through the criminal code, especially we've done that here in Canada. We've looked at it through that lens, which is the occupational health and safety. So we're looking at it and trying to get ourselves set up and ready for that storyline. But I bring this up because there's an interesting thing that's going to start taking place, is that the education system, teachers and that are being challenged. And what's going to happen when you have something like a parent day and a parent's going to come in and talk about what's going on? So in a sense, the parents coming in to share lived experience, they're coming in to sort of do a mentoring role. Do they have to be paraprofessionals to come in and do that? You could do the same thing from someone like the firefighter coming in to talk about, the workplace ideas and things like that. There's going to be an interesting push and pull, I think, that might start to take place in that youth education field. Is if you enter into the classroom, how prepared must you be in an educative approach, rather than just coming in and sharing as we used to share, as just, it came from the heart, this is what's going on. There might be some questions. So this notion of paraprofessional, this Parents' Day, and I might be making a mountain out of a molehill, I don't know, but it was something I was been thinking about as I've been watching this unfold, especially in youth. But there's also universities. Who can go to universities to speak on the stage, to give extracurricular activity presentations, right, and things like that. So I just thought I would just bring it up to make a connection. Any thoughts about that one, Doug?
It's actually got me thinking, because I do go to the college or to the university from time to time and speak on mentoring, and now I've included, I know the last time I spoke on mentoring and mental health, and we did a case study right in the classroom, and it involved a couple mental health challenges that they could face. So quite interesting, actually.
Okay, great. Well, that's wonderful, and that's another good example. Okay, and this is why when you mentor, right? When you coach, when you instruct, right? These kind of ideas are really important, and that's why we wanted to go through this steep review, just to remind you and ourselves of the social cultural lens, the technology lens, the environmental lens, the economic lens, the political lens of looking at this thing called mentoring, right? And over time, we will probably dig into some of these a little bit more. I know the technology one's going to really pop forward and sort of see what happens here. And I think we'll probably do something again a little bit later about, is it worth creating a business based on the shingle of mentoring or not, right? I would certainly have Doug come in and share a little bit more about, the notion of this mentoring, social, cultural, mental health aspect, but is there a business that's associated there for someone and things like that? So we will be weaving in and out of this, all right, as we go forward. But one of the things we would certainly reach out to you, those who are listening in, is here's the question: what are some ideas you can add about STEEP and mentoring that you wanted to bring forward? Is there questions of us? Is there a point that you wanted to make? So when you subscribe to the channel, there is the comments section there. Please add in. You might find that there's things you want to add, alter, delete to what Doug and I have shared. Please add those in, right? We're wanting to move this forward and see if there's ways in which we can continue to advance, amplify. I guess in one sense is to acknowledge the importance of mentoring in our lives. That's what Doug and I are attempting to do in our work around, improving, focusing, and strengthening mentor practice, doing things through the international mentoring community, especially the certification and support of it for those who are looking for something like that. So I think that's pretty well getting us to a close here, Doug, in terms of our initial STEEP review of mentoring for 2023 in the All Things Mentoring Lounge. And I think if there's nothing else we want to add, we'll look towards closing. And I see you're nodding yes. Okay. So as I bring us in, it has been our tradition that Doug takes us out, and there's something he usually shares with us that emphasizes a point. So that would be really great. I just want to make a shout out to Green Planet Initiative 2050 for dropping in to say hello. Appreciate that. I know that is a person out of Kenya who pops in every once in a while and has a listen in. So thanks to Green Planet Initiative 2050. So Doug, I'll just ask you to give us what that final thought is. When I know you're done, I'll just say take care to everyone, and I will end the broadcast. So over to you.
So we talked about economic as part of the STEEP process, and the one thing that was mentioned was the growth of mentoring as a business solution. And what I've seen in a number of different situations is where organizations have actually built into their strategic planning the aspect of the implementation of mentoring and the provision of ongoing training and that for their mentors within the organization. So if you're entertaining, should we or shouldn't we go down this path or whatever, look at it from a strategic business perspective, and you'll find that it is a tool that you need to have in place to help your organization achieve its desired results.
And reach out to Doug if you want those insights. So with that, everyone, take care.